You're listening to the weekly Dartscast 180.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, episode 179. We're getting close to our first maximum on the show. I feel it's only a few days away now from getting that first 180. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, Darts statistician Burton, DeWitt. How you doing?
Well, I already had a 180 in our Bang Average Darts League 2, so it'll be your first 180, my second associated with this show. But I'm doing well. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm doing good too. Thank you very much. And we've got lots to get into. And before we get into that, just want to say a big thank you to everyone who listened to our Barry Hearn interview over the weekend. We put it out after our last regular show, and lots of you listening. Thanks to Barry for being so generous with his time as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in for that. And if there's any new listeners that have carried on listening to the show this week, thanks for sticking with us. And lots to get into. We've got 3 guests coming up on the show, so we'll get straight into it with a look back at the weekend. And we usually record these shows a couple of days after the events, but we've had a bit longer to digest things that took place in Coventry over the weekend. Michael van Gerwen back to winning ways on the TV, wins the Players' Championship finals, a record 6th time, 11-10 winning the final against Mervyn King on Sunday night, his first TV title since March. But can we now say the world number one is back?
We can definitely say that he is getting back. And it's something, there's 2 big critiques that I've had of him over the last year or so. The big one that I've harped on about over the last few months is that his consistency hasn't been there. He's not been able to put together back-to-back top-level matches, and he's kind of done that now in the last few tournaments, both, especially in the group stage of the Grand Slam, and then pretty much the entire weekend in the Players' Championship final. So he's gotten that together, and that's, when you go back to when he was at his best, he didn't have off matches. He had off mini sessions where he might drop to a 93 average for 5 legs. He'd still probably win 3 of those 5. But he very, very rarely had off matches. And an off match for him was like a 98, 99. Well, he was able to keep that consistency now pretty much every match for the last 2 tournaments. But this thing, though, that still has not been there is he's not at the level he was at 4 years ago. Granted, he doesn't have to be at that level to be back. He still won the majority of tournaments, even as his overall standard has dropped over the last few years. So if we're saying, is he now back to the clear number one? I want to see him do it at Worlds. I want to see him do it more often, but he did look more like that. And he did look like he had the confidence of the world number one again in the Players' Championship final. But he's definitely not anywhere near the player he was 3-4 years ago when he was averaging 103, 104 on average. And as I said, an off match for him was a 98. He was averaging over 110 about as often as he was averaging under 100. That's him back at his best. He's nowhere near that. But he doesn't have to be anywhere near that to be the world number one. And if he keeps playing like he has over the last month, he is back to being the world number one, at least in form.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there when you say he's getting back to his best. And the big test is the big test for every player that enters the tournament is going to be the World Championship coming up in less than 2 weeks' time now. But if he had missed out on this title, he'd have gone into it in the longest run without winning a TV title since he won his first TV title in the PDC, the World Grand Prix, all the way back in 2012. He's had a couple of runs. I was looking back today. He's had a couple of runs where he's gone 7 months without winning a TV title, and the first of those runs came after the World Grand Prix, then won the Premier League. In between that, he had the Grand Slam and World Championship final, and then the second run coming after the Premier League and Dubai titles that he won in May 2013. He then won the Players' Championship finals, and then he won his first world title a few weeks later. Since then, we've not seen a run like this before from Michael van Gerwen, and we've spoken about him a lot on this show this year since, of course, the virus outbreak and everything in March. He won that UK Open just before that, and it's been a long time for him between winning these TV titles. And looking at his performances at the weekend, he did ride his luck a little bit, you've got to say. The semi-final against Going Price 8-6 up, missed 2 darts at tops for 9-6 in a race to 11 with that break. You'd have probably fancied him to get the job done, but he didn't win another leg after that. Michael coming back to win that one 11-8, and even in the final as well. I mean, what a final. We're going to come on to talk about Mervyn King in a moment, but some of the finishes that Van Gerwen was putting in, I've got them down here, 160, 120, 135. Those were the ones that will stand out the most, and the 146 as well. But a few others that I'll mention there, 72, 94 and 96. So 7 of the 11 legs that he won came with these combination finishes, and they're what we're used to seeing him do time after time. And you probably say before the Grand Slam, when he was starting to get back into some form again on TV, those finishes weren't there. He was rarely threatening those big finishes. So I think it's good signs. If you are a Michael van Gerwen fan, you're probably going into this World Championship with a bit more confidence, and the man himself certainly will be as well. But yeah, like you, I want to see what he can do in this World Championship, and if he can produce that form again over a longer format and a longer spell as well over the 2 or 3 weeks that it'll be.
Michael van Gerwen, as we mentioned, first televised title since March, beating Mervyn King, who was in his first ranking televised final in 8 years. But for Mervyn King, fell just one leg short of what would have been his first PDC major. How do you think he'll look back at the weekend?
I know we try and stay as impartial as possible on this show, but watching that final on Sunday night, I don't think there would be too many people that weren't gutted to see Mervyn King finish up on the runners-up side on that occasion, because he played superb in that game. And I mentioned just a second ago those finishes that he was getting hit against him, and it weren't like for a lot of those legs he was miles behind. A lot of those legs he was right up there. He was on a 2-dart finish or on a double, and see your opponent putting big finishes like that, the big celebrations as well. I know he wasn't too keen on seeing them, but he came back every time, and it was a shame, because the 1-2-6 finish that he had on the ball to get it back to 8-9 on throw, the next 2 legs on his throw, he throws 2 13-darters, and okay, the final leg, the decider, Van Gerwen had the darts, but he closed it out in 17 darts. If he'd have been able to produce one of those 13 darters against the throw, we'd have started this show talking about Mervyn King as the oldest first-time winner of a PDC televised ranking event at 54. I'm gutted for him, because I thought he played superb in that final, played superb the whole weekend, and looking back on his finals as well in the PDC on TV, 85, 89, 81 in a double start, and 92 was the last one in the Masters. He's averaged just under 100 in that final over 21 legs. I think he's still got a lot more to give in this game, and I think we'll see him in another TV final. I'm not quite sure when it's going to be, but I'll say it now, I don't think we're going to be waiting another 8 years for his next TV ranking final, or 6 years before any TV final from him again. I think the signs are good for him.
I guess in a way, I'll go in the other direction, that I think this was his last chance to win a major. But if he plays like he did this past weekend, I'll be proven wrong, because he was probably, I think it's fair to say, the second best player over the course of the weekend, behind only the champion. And he wasn't that far off him, not just in that final match, but over the course of the entire weekend. You start with his brilliant first-round win over Dave Chisnell, who didn't play too poorly himself, followed it up with another stellar performance against Danny Noppert, beat one of the players of the weekend in Karol Sedlacek in the third round, and then from 7-2 down, just blitzed Damon Hedda, playing might be the 9 best legs of his career to come back and win that match 10-8. He looked like the best player on the planet after the second break in that match. And we could say, he was fortunate not to go 8-2 down. But once he was given that lifeline, he played fabulously for the rest of that match. Lifted his average from low 90s to over 100. Well, we'll throw out the semifinal. He didn't do anything wrong, but Peter Wright didn't show up. And we saw it in the post-match interview where Mervyn King just didn't know what to say, because Peter Wright, who had been great up until then all weekend, just didn't show up. Mervyn King did what he had to. And then in that final, to keep getting hit like he did, those outshots that Michael van Gerwen hit, that kept seeming like he was putting the match away. Mervyn King just kept hitting right back and didn't do much wrong. Michael van Gerwen didn't do much wrong. How often can you say Michael van Gerwen, okay, early on, one of the early legs, he missed a few darts at double and got punished? That was really the only mistake Michael van Gerwen made the entire match, and he won in a last leg decider. You don't really hear that often. That's how good Mervyn King played this weekend. That said, it's the best we've seen from him in a very long time. You have to feel gutted for him, because if he'd fought against any other Michael van Gerwen we've seen this year, he would have won the title. He ran into van Gerwen getting back to his best and playing the best we've seen from him all year. I think this was the opportunity. Mervyn King has improved this year on last year when he struggled. That's why he missed the match play this year. If he can keep playing like this, he has every single chance in every tournament, because he did play that well. But we haven't seen enough to think that he will be able to maintain that standard and fight like that over a course of an entire tournament to win one. I hope he proves me wrong, because that was fantastic to watch. And he should think about this as just a fantastic weekend for him. But I'll disagree with you. I don't think we'll see him in another TV final. But please, Mervyn, prove me wrong.
Well, let's hear from someone who had the best view for that brilliant final that we saw on Sunday. Here's our chat with the ITV pundit and commentator, Chris Mason. I'm pleased to say I'm joined once again by the ITV pundit and commentator, Chris Mason. Thanks again for the time, Chris. How you doing?
Yeah, absolute pleasure, mate. Really good. Well, about as good as everyone else right now, but yeah, looking forward to coming out of lockdown life.
Fingers crossed for that. Well, there's only one place to start, and that is last night when we're talking Michael van Gerwen back in the winners' enclosure on TV for the first time in 8 months. What was your overall assessment on Michael's run to the title last night?
Yeah, I thought he was outstanding. There was the odd sign of fragility there, which we've seen in the last, I don't know, maybe 12 to 18 months, but he got it all right over the last few days. And in that final, pushed all the way, pushed hard by a very, very good Merv King who, I mean, he averaged just under 100, didn't he? And Michael 104.98 in the final. A tournament average of 102. Yeah, you couldn't really ask much more from him, really. It was really good to see. The game needs a very good version of Michael van Gerwen because he's just so exciting to watch. And he's the one that's been making headlines, but for the past 12 months, making headlines for the wrong reasons, really, because he's not been winning.
We should give a mention to the runner-up. You mentioned him there, Mervyn King, 200-1 pre-tournament outsider, 20 years on from his first major final at the World Masters, still competing in these big finals. Beat Peter Wright in the semi-finals, of course, but just fell short again in that final hurdle. What do you think's missing for him to get that first big title in the PDC?
Same as missing for a lot of the other ones. Just a little bit of luck here and there, and something to drop right for him, or an inspirational shot. I mean, that 1-2-6 he took out was incredible. You couldn't ask any more from him. His finishing stats in the final: 10 out of 16, 62 and 62.5%. I said he had 3 ton-plus finishes in the final. I mean, there was 7 in total, all the way down to the wire. When Michael goes out, you know, he sat there on, I think he wanted 45, didn't he, or 47, I can't quite remember. Yeah, he just gave it everything, and he was fabulous in that match against Dave Chisnall early doors when he averaged 105. So there's still plenty in the locker there for Merv. It seems going back to work has done him some good. You know, he didn't. I'm not sure how it all got mixed up. It's basically boredom, and you know, Merv's very popular on the exhibition circuit. Well, that was taken out of the equation because of, obviously, with the lockdown and everything else, and the limitations of what pubs could do. So he decided to go back driving and delivering a few parcels just for something to do. And it seems to have, I don't know, maybe it's just refreshed him, because that's as well as I've seen Merv play for many a year. Every now and again he pops up with a decent performance, but consistently that was very, very good. And he was just, it's a bit unfortunate for him that he came up against a very, very good Michael van Gerwen. Anybody else that could have got to that final with that kind of performance, he might have had more of a shout against Gezi Price if he'd have got over the line against Michael in the other semi-final, but it wasn't to be. But he'll take so much from that. I mean, there were so many positives, and he'll be a dangerous floater in the World Championship.
Definitely. Well, for you guys on the ITV team, we've had recently the World Series, the European Championship. You were based in the studio away from the venue. So what was it like being back in the venue at the weekend? Of course, still behind closed doors with no fans, but being back in the venue, was that good for you guys?
Yeah, it was nice. A few people. We were in a completely separate bubble to the PDC, so I didn't get a chance to see any of the players. Yeah, so our team was kept, the production side of everything was kept totally separate to everything else. So yeah, new experience for me. It's never going to be the same without the fans, but we just tried to make the best job we could out of it. The same with what Sky done. The way they produced it was outstanding. And at times, if you do watch it on the TV, you you just get carried away with the match. You forget that there's no fans there, but I can't wait until they're back, and hopefully everything crossed. The World Championship will see potentially 1,000 fans in there, which will be not only great for TV sport, but great for the players, and of course great for the PDC. Huge financial hit this year, but I know a lot of people have said it, but they've done an outstanding job. All of the team, from Matchroom all the way through to PDC, and of course Sky and ITV, to continue to bring the fans the action the best way we could.
And since we last spoke, I think it was just before the World Series finals, we've had a few new first-time winners in PDC televised events, and one I want to touch on is Jose de Souza. What have you made of his rise?
Yeah, he's a wonderful player. He's got a great mentality for the sport. He's as gracious in victory as he is in defeat. He's a huge scorer. I can actually remember him qualifying for the Worlds a couple of years ago and playing, sure it was Michael Barnard in the first round or the prelim game. It was an absolute stinker. And then, I don't know, maybe 12, 18 months ago, he started to pop some big averages in every now and again. And then I just sort of followed his progress, and wow, what a 12 months he's had. And he looks like he can improve. I mean, 46, comes from a soft tip background, but has no problem getting over the line. That's what I like about him. He's carrying no luggage, no battle scars, because he doesn't have any bad memories. And you can compare that with Michael Smith. If you said to me, obviously Michael Smith's a superior player to Jose, but of course he doesn't carry the scars that Michael does. He's dangerous in every event he plays in. He's a wonderful player. Like I said, I love his attitude. Counting can be a little bit strange at times, but that's obviously going to improve the more he plays.
2 weeks tomorrow until the World Championship will get underway. It's confirmed it's going to be at Ali Pali. When we're speaking, you mentioned it there, we're not quite sure if we're going to get fans in. Barry Hearn hoping to have 1,000 for each session. Having it still at Ali Pali is obviously massive, but how much will the event be boosted if we are allowed to get the fans back in?
Yeah, I mean, the players are crying out for it. I think we heard from a lot of the guys over this weekend and previous weekends where we've had the opportunity to hear them interviewed, how hard a few of them are finding it. It's very sterile, literally, and a lot of players rely on that to motivate them. I mean, it's been good for a few players including Merv King, who does get a fair bit of abuse from the fans, and then you've got someone like Dimitri, who likes to take his time and regroup when he tends to do that when there's a crowd in. They get on his back, but the players are absolutely crying out for it, and so are the TV companies, the broadcasters, and of course the PDC. It's just not the same without the crowd, because they've been such an integral part of why the sport is now so popular.
And if we do get that limited crowd, it's going to look and sound very different compared to what it usually is at Ali Pali. Do you think that quieter, perhaps less party-like atmosphere could play a factor in what we see unfold?
Well, I reckon obviously it's going to be certain sort of restrictions in place, so I presume they won't be as well lubricated. But I think what they'll do, they may rejig the venue and actually try and make the venue smaller, so it's full, if you know what I mean. They'll use that capacity so it meets all the guidelines, of course. So hopefully the 1,000 won't look lost in there, because it's a big venue. I think it holds somewhere around 3,700. So if they kept it as it is or as it was, I think the crowd would look a little lost in there. So I'm sure they will. You know what the PDC is like; they're innovative. They'll come up with something to make it look not look so the fans are lost. And listen, 1,000 people, they'll make more than enough noise. I mean, you only got to look back at Lakeside. That only used to hold just over 1,000, and so did the Circus Tavern. So I think it's just about how they place the fans in the venue and how they make it look. But incredible. And I mean, it's going to be amazing. I mean, there's so many first-time or debutants that are competing this year. They're going to, I mean, it's not going to be as good, of course, but they're still going to have a great time. You know, people like Claire Macker, Jason Lowe, pretty sure, Scott Waite, his debut there, obviously loads of experience. Well, I'm looking forward to David Evans. I've seen a lot of him while I did the Modus event, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes. But yeah, it's a great field. The field was, well, we're speaking today on Monday. The field was completed today, wasn't it? The final remaining qualifiers. We had Neil Zonneveld come through. We've seen, of course, over the weekend, and Karol Stefacek. They came through the rest of the world qualifiers. And young Kieran Sheehan, he beat Joe Vernon to come through. Lovely to see Jamie Lewis back at the Worlds. He's had his own issues away from the Ockies, so that's great news. Matthew Edgar, he's back, and I think that means he retains his card. And Nick Kenny, there's another one making his debut. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be amazing, because it's going to be obviously our first one back. Fingers crossed that we do get a crowd, and it's just so many players in such good form. You know, Gerwyn Price, right? He did have that iffy game against Merv King in the Players' Championship. I'm sure he'll have that sorted out. Gezi Price, Jose, expect Durrant to come back playing a lot better than he's been now that it appears that he's pretty much recovered. It's going to be a fabulous event. I mean, it always is anyway, but this year it's going to be extra special.
What's it like then as a player? Obviously, we're 2 weeks away from it now getting underway, but you've played in countless World Championships, both sides of the code, the BDO, the PDC. What's it like these few weeks leading up to the event? This is the biggest tournament that you guys play in. What's it like getting ready for that, and the sense of expectation, anticipation playing in this tournament?
Yeah, well, they're fortunate that they've had a lot of darts, so any issues would have been, well, hopefully resolved by now. Their practice will be up to speed. Their stamina will be up to speed. You know, it's a bit like, I suppose it's pretty much, you know, like a boxer. They go away into camp, and the sort of the last week or two they wind it down a little bit, and then it's the big kick come the 15th of December. You know, there's still time for the players that don't feel they're in great form, but the ones that tend to have a lot more work to do is those guys that came through the final qualifiers, because obviously they're preparing for a qualifier and not a world championship. So yeah, they're the ones that will be putting in probably more work than most, but the majority of the players now, no doubt the ones that were in the Players' Championships, they probably have today and tomorrow off, and then they'll start putting in the 3, 4, 5 hour sessions just to make sure they're absolutely on the top of their game by the time the world's come around. Because as we know, as we've seen in the past, the opportunity is there. We've seen, you know, Rob Cross change his life with winning on his debut. So we've seen so many debutants or first-time winners this year, young and old. You know, going from one end of the scale from Dimitri to 49-year-old Peter Wright winning the Worlds, and then Jose winning the Slam. So yeah, it's exciting times for the players, and it's a great opportunity to change some of their lives.
And before we let you go, just want to touch on a couple of things away from the PDC. We recently had the Grand Slam. All likelihood that was going to be the last one to have that PDC versus BDO tag. A lot of debate going on at the moment. WDF, MAD, UKDA, the PDC affiliate tours like the Asian Tour. If you were in charge, what would you do with those potential vacant spots next year in the Grand Slam?
I mean, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with regards to the WDF. I mean, there was events ready to go. There was the TVs, the broadcasters in place. The prize money was in place. Sponsors were in place. And then, lo and behold, COVID's come along. So I'm pretty sure by the time fingers crossed, February or March, the WDF will make a few announcements, and hopefully the WDF sanctioned events will take place. And from the whispers I hear, there will be, they want to run in, in alignment with the PDC. They want to follow a lot of their guidelines, a lot of their rules, and I'm sure that there will be a certain group of players that will come from that WDF ranking system. There won't be any major events played prior to the Slam. So, I wouldn't have thought so. Maybe the World Masters, I'm not quite sure. But certainly it won't be the World Championship, because that always and traditionally will start as the PD comes to an end. So maybe they'll pick it from, I don't know, maybe they'll get 4 in, maybe they might get 8 in. I'm not quite sure what Matt Porter's and Barry's plans are with regards to that. But yeah, the WDF will certainly play a big role in amateur darts in 2021 and beyond. I'm fortunate enough to speak to somebody who's involved, and it's looking very positive. And all they've got to worry about is the World Masters, the World Cup, the Europe Cups, and the World Championship. The county darts is now a separate entity, and of course there's no more DDOs to worry about. So, but from what I've been told, it all looks very, very positive. And listen, the PDC have always come up with new innovative ideas, and I'm sure they understand the commercial value of having other players in it that people might not see a lot of. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I think it's always been different because of that. Because of the basis on having other players in it, not just the cream of the PDC. So I'm sure they'll want to keep that in place. But yeah, I wish all the best to the WDF in 2021 and beyond. But from what I can tell, everything's gonna fall into place for them.
Good to hear. Well, lastly, we know you're a big advocate of the ladies' game as well. Since we last spoke, we've seen the PDC have their first women's series. There's been a lot of positive feedback we've seen on that as well. What are your thoughts really on the ladies' game going forward? Would you like to see the PDC maybe expand that women's series next year, maybe do more weekends? What are your thoughts really on the ladies' game going forward?
Well, to be honest, I was really disappointed with the turnout. It was poorly attended, and the money on offer, was staggering. I don't think there's too many other events where there's tournaments put on for women where they can win that kind of prize money, and that's what frightens me is the lack of participation and the lack of entries. If the PDC are going to try and step in and create a tour, it can't be a tour where there's limited numbers turning up. I thought some of the standards of the darts throughout was outstanding. We know the problem is it's not the strength, it's the depth, it's the amount of top quality female players, and of course to become a TV spectacle, you're going to need some depth. But if the PDC are going out of their way to put events on and then they can't be bothered to turn up, I just can't see how it will go forward. But Barry loves sport. He's not one of these that worries about whether it's a male sport or a female sport. He just loves sport, but it's got to be commercially viable. He's not a charity. He's a very, very successful businessman for a reason. And as we know, he's fairly ruthless. So if they do go about putting on other events, I really hope they're much better supported than the last one, or it will be very short-lived.
Well, Chris, it's always a pleasure to get you on the show and have a catch-up on all things darts, so I appreciate you taking out the time and wish you all the best for the rest of 2020.
Absolute pleasure, and if I don't speak to you before, make sure you all have a great Christmas and your listeners.
Support for the weekly Dartscast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ADONIS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code ADONIS. Your balls will thank you. Now, if you excuse me.
Thanks again to Chris for joining us, and some more darts to talk about that we've seen since our last show, and it was on Monday, the PDPA Qualifier, the last chance for the tour card holders that weren't in this year's World Championship to get a spot. We found out there was going to be 6 spots instead of the usual 2 in the end, and it was going to be split between the UK and rest of the world players, and we've got our 6 players that have come through the field to get those final spots. Kieran Tehan, Jamie Lewis, Matthew Edgar, Nick Kenny, Neil Zonneveld and Karel Sedlacek. They're all going to Ali Pali in a few weeks' time. But just looking back on the qualifier, and should say as well, our bigger preview for the World Championships, that will be coming on next week's show. But just looking back at the qualifier, who would you say were the biggest winners and losers?
Well, I mean, I think you have to start the biggest winner. Well, we'll see. But you have to start with Jamie Lewis. I mean, everyone in darts has talked about the struggles he's had since that World Championship semifinal run. And really, you can go back a full year before that. You go back 2015, 2016, early in his career, he was making the televised tournaments. He was qualified twice for the World Match Play, once for the World Grand Prix, and just never kicked on from there, and had to go through the PDPA Qualifier the year that he ended up making the semifinals, which came out of the blue, and then just hasn't done anything since then. But he didn't really play all that well over the course of his 3 matches. He, in fact, was in the bottom quarter for averages of all the players in the field, but he won. And that's really, at the end of the day, all that matters. And that's not something that he's been doing nearly enough over the last couple of years. So you have to say, he is the big winner. But at the same time, we saw the last time he was on stage, averaging under 60 on the European tour. I do have some fears for him that if his head is not in the right place, that this qualifying for the World Championships might actually be worse for him than had he lost and not qualified. But assuming his head's in the right place, and it had to at least be on its way to being in the right place to win 3 matches, to win scraps like he did against Robert Thornton in the final, you have to say he's one of the winners coming through, and not necessarily saving his career, because almost certainly he's off to Q School, but showing for himself that he can still win ahead of Q School. Big losers on the day. Hard to say. Justin Pipe, injured, so he didn't get to participate, even though he was one of the top 25 players in the Players' Championship events over the course of the year. So he didn't play, but you could say he's one of the big losers. But I'll go on the European side. How about Lung Kai Fan? And similar to Justin Pipe is that he got a bit unlucky over the course of the year, just kept running into big performances, and that's why he had to play in this. Had the second highest average in the the rest of the world, I should say. He's not even European, he's Asian, but in the rest of the world qualifier. But ran into an on-form Martin Schindler, and unfortunately, Martin Schindler's performance dropped in his next match, which is why he didn't qualify himself. But averaging 102 against Lung Kai Fan, that's what's been happening to Lung all year. He's got to be considered one of the losers, but he acquitted himself well in his first year as a tour card holder. I expect next year he'll qualify by right. He's too good of a player not to, but it is a missed opportunity for him in what he would have been thinking was a great chance to qualify for the Worlds.
Well, I'll start in the other direction. You started with the UK qualifier. I'll start with that rest of the world qualifier. And as I mentioned, the players being split into the 2 pots, if you like, and some of the players only needed to win 2 games on that Monday to get through to the World Championship. And we'll talk about players that are looking to keep hold of their tour card, and a couple of players that lost out in the final. I've got to start with them, Jan Decker and Martin Schindler. They've been on the tour. Jan, I think, has been on it since 2016. Martin's been on it since 2017. So they've been around a little while. They've had their successes themselves, but both of them losing out in that final, and it looks like they're going to be both heading to Q School to try and get back on the tour. So they're probably the 2 main losers I'd pick out from the rest of the world. Going over to the UK qualifier, there was a few players in there, of course, that needed to get to the World Championship to save their tour card, and one of them was Matthew Edgar, who you're going to hear from on this show a little bit later on, and some brilliant performances from him on that day to get through. He had to come through 3 games to get through. He had a 6-5 against Martin Atkins in his second game, and then the final as well against Josh Payne, who was, I think, the seeded player for his section of the draw going into the day. And when he found out that was who he could potentially play in the final, that was what he was building up to, and beats him quite comfortably. Went 6-1 up, ends up winning 7-2 with a 95, almost 96 average. And that's got him into that top 64 going into this World Championship, and looks like he should be safe for his tour card for another year, which is good to see. He's got a great following. Jamie Lewis as well, you mentioned him. Great to see him get to the World Championship. Going into Monday, you wouldn't have given much chance considering what we've seen from him this year, and you touched on that Euro Tour as well. It was sad to see a player of his ability put in a performance like that, but he's shown tremendous character, really, hasn't he, to come through that battle that he's had. I'm just hoping that he can put in a good performance in the World Championship. It's going to take a big run for him to keep hold of his tour card, but we've seen him come through that qualifier and go to the semi-final, so it's not beyond him. And just finishing up on the UK qualifiers, of course, got to give a mention to, as you like to call him, and I'll call him as well, the all-time great Robert Thornton, losing out to Jamie Lewis in that final. I think we'd have probably liked to see both of those players get there, but he lost out 7-5, and he's won big titles in the PDC, and he's now got one of the biggest battles of his career, because we know players that lose out their tour card, it's not a guarantee that they're going to come through Q-Score and get back on the tour straight away.
Definitely not. And of course, we have to give credit where credit's due. I believe it's Dan Dawson who coined all-time great Robert Thornton, but hard to argue against a 3-time major champion being an all-time great. Now, the schedule is out, and we will talk more about the Worlds next week in our World Championship preview show. But there's also been a rule change this year for the first time. Well, for the while now in the first round, I should say, there's not been a tiebreak in the final set. If it gets to 2-2, that was the last leg. But now they're doing that for all rounds to avoid sessions overrunning. Do you agree with the change?
Well, I don't agree with the change, but I can understand the reasons that they've made this decision, and it's fair enough that the PDC weren't going to do the big announcement about this rule, because as we've seen on social media today, when they put the schedule out, there was a paragraph in there stating about this change, that tiebreak rule wouldn't be in effect this year. And there's been a lot of disappointment from fans that they're going to miss out on potentially some great matches not going into that tiebreak. And as I say, we're going to come on to talk about the fans coming back, which has been confirmed, and you're going to hear from our good friend of the show, Matthew Kiernan, his thoughts on it. But I think one of the big reasons this has been done is to make sure that we don't get any overrunning in the sessions, because to get the fans back in for this World Championship is the first time that we're going to see fans back in the UK since March. The PDC have had to jump through an awful lot of hurdles, and if they can make this World Championship run as smooth as possible, get the sessions done, or be sure that they're going to be done at a certain time more than if they'd have kept the tiebreak rule, then I can see why they've done it. And I've only got to give one example really for this, and it was a session that I was at a few years ago now, 2016, 2017. An unbelievable game between Andrew Gilding and John Henderson in the first or second round. It went 28 legs, went to a sudden death leg, and I think that was the third or fourth game of the session. There was still another game to go, and they finished at, I think it's around about 5:15, and there was, as I say, another game still to play, which finished around 6 o'clock, and that was a relatively easy game, I think, for the player that won it in the end. So if that had gone a long way as well, we could have been talking about a session that ran into 6:30, 7 o'clock, and the times that we usually expect these games to, the evening sessions to start, is 7 o'clock. So it'd have been eaten into another session. They've said ticket holders, they're going to all have to arrive at a certain time, all going to get different times to turn up to keep with the social distancing and all the rules. So I can understand it. We're going to miss out potentially on some big moments. You know, only got to think about 2 games that stand out straight away from World Championships. Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld, and Rob Cross, Michael van Gerwen both went to sudden death legs. We're not going to get that drama this year, but I do think we're still going to see some brilliant games, and hopefully we'll see the tiebreak will come back next year.
Yeah, and I think the key thing in everything that you said is this year, and hopefully it comes back next year, because I'm in full agreement. I think it is right for this year that something had to be done differently to ensure to the greatest extent possible the safety of the players and the safety of the fans. You cannot take the risk that fans, the limited number of fans that will be there, but still there will be fans, because of a session running late, aren't able to find safe and affordable transit home if the sessions go too late. So I think this year it had to be done who knows what's going to happen? You know, you could end up with a match that still goes the maximum number of legs, and have someone walk off because there's a draft on stage and causing a 45-minute delay. Things can happen. But as they often do at the World Championships. But one easy way to limit the chance of that is to at least get rid of the tiebreak. And the tiebreak is awesome. As you mentioned, you go back to that Rob Cross, Michael Van Gerwen match, you go back in the World Championship finals previously, the Barney Taylor match, the Painter Taylor match. Was it the Gregory Taylor match back in the BDO? There's been quite a few that have gone to that tiebreak in the final set, especially in a world final. But in any late in the tournament match, it's great to watch. We're going to miss that for a year, but I think the change had to be done. But like you said, hopefully next year it's back to normal. I still don't like the fact that the match play has sudden death. I wish they would play out, although I can understand at some point you just got to say, we can't have this go on forever. But I still disagree. I would like to see some of those matches go on forever. I believe Hybrex and Hendo would still be playing right now if they didn't introduce the sudden death. But yeah, no, I think it was needed for this year, but I hope it's just this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind either, because that would mean I'd still be in the Winter Gardens watching that game. But let's hear from a player that won't be involved in any World Championship tiebreaks this year, but he will be involved in the World Championship. Here's our chat with the legend himself, Paul Lim. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the winner of yesterday's Hong Kong qualifier for the PDC World Championship, the legend himself, Paul Lim. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, except being stuck here for 9 months and not going anywhere, but I'm all right.
Well, you're going to be going somewhere soon, of course. We're talking just over 24 hours since you won that final to secure your spot back at Alexandra Palace for the PDC World Championship. What's the feeling been like since you won, knowing that you're going to be playing in the Worlds again?
Oh, I tell you what, it was, in fact, I for the last few months, having the chance to go to the PDC World Cup, and I was supposed to go, and then next thing I knew, I was, my partner from Singapore couldn't make it because of the regulation and all that, so we got to opt out. So that cut off one of my what I should say, the favorite tournament that I love to go to, the World Cup, PDC World Cup, and then now having like I said, then suddenly I thought this was going to because of the Asia tour not being there, I really don't know how they're going to select, and there was no news of any selection or qualifying, and then suddenly on the last minute, I think PDC has got through to someone that is going to organize, and I'm so glad that we are, that the Asians anyway have a chance to still qualify and go and compete in the World Championship. For me personally, it's like I say again, it's an honor. Always to be. I love that tournament, even though I do play well sometimes there, but I really want to do better. Since for the last 9 months I've been stuck in a house, practicing. I hope it pays off anyway.
Definitely, yeah. And as you touched on there, the Asian Tour this year cancelled due to the pandemic. So how excited were you when you found out that there was going to be a Hong Kong qualifier? You were going to be able to play and get a chance to qualify for the World Championship.
Oh yeah. I was. Like I said, when the organizer actually told me that there's going to be a qualifier and the date is set, I was concerned. I was really concerned, not so much, that we actually have the qualifier. I was more concerned actually, in fact, what's going to happen once you qualified. I was really thinking ahead that I was going to win. I'm going to win it and go to England. But then I was thinking also, is that what is going to happen with the quarantine? Coming back to Hong Kong, which is not a problem for me coming back. If I get quarantined in Hong Kong, that's okay coming back. But going there, I was kind of a concern, and I was asking a lot of questions about that. So my mind was all around that, and not really kind of thinking about whether I'm going to win the sport or not. You know what I'm saying? I kind of took things for granted then, But I was confident enough to kind of feel that through the time I've spent on the dartboard. Of course, it's no tournament, but I've spent so much time on the dartboard, and I can see myself improving and throwing more 180s, and shorter game. The averages are better, and it gave me a lot of confidence. So I was kind of probably counting the chicken before they are hatched, but still, I'm glad I got it anyway. So I proved myself right this time. So
you touched on as well about the PDC World Cup. We spoke to your partner, would have been your partner, Harry Lim, on our show last month, and he was unfortunately unable to get to Austria for the tournament due to the restrictions in Singapore. When you found out about that, how much of a blow was it to miss out? As you mentioned, you've been stuck at home for 9 months.
I tell you what, I'm kind of so mad. I'm so mad at the situation, because he was all ready to go too, But like I said, I can't really blame him. I mean, I was trying to find all kind of option for him to actually still go to Austria. I was telling him, I said, maybe you should go to Austria and then come back to Hong Kong, because the problem is that he can't go to Austria and go back to Singapore, because Singapore wouldn't allow him to go in because it was a lockdown. So I was telling him, I said, maybe you can go to Austria and then come back to Hong Kong and quarantine in Hong Kong for 14 days and then see what happened. But I mean, obviously, I'm just saying that, but I just don't think it's fair for me to really kind of impose that on him, because it really is a lot, but he can't be away from his family and his job and all that, so I was, I really was devastated. I was just kind of, I wasn't happy, because like I said again, I really look forward to that World Cup, because it's such a great tournament and I love representing the country, so for such a long time we've been off tournaments, and I think this was something which I was been looking forward to, and then suddenly everything, ticket were booked, the hotels were all arranged, and so I was all set to go get my test, got my COVID-19 test, and then it was, I was kind of worried about that too, but then it was negative, so I got the test result. I was happy and I was ready to go, and then everything came to a halt, Yeah, definitely a burner. There was a burner anyway.
Well, let's get back to yesterday's qualifier then, and it was a close final in the end. You come through 7-5 to win it, and the player you played, we touched on him as well just off air. He seems like he could be a player to watch out for. What is the dart scene like in Hong Kong at the moment? I know it's difficult with the virus, but does it look good for the future?
Oh yes, definitely. I think in Asia especially, I think because living in Hong Kong right now, I mean, I think the steel darts. I mean, Hong Kong is very popular for its soft darts anyway. But with what's happening with the PDC Asia Tour coming in, and then what actually is PDC has provided, players are kind of a dream or hope, that they can actually go to the big stage, which everyone wants. And so I think it drives a younger player now to practice and play hard and things like that, and get more involved with steel darts and all that. So it was good, but it's a shame. I mean, we have a great league in Hong Kong still, but because of the virus situation, the government doesn't allow, there's a restriction in the bar, how many people to a table, and you cannot have a group. So the league was all kind of cancelled. So for this whole year right now, we don't have nothing to play, because we normally have what they call the Hong Kong Masters every week, where we play and we select the team to play in the whether it's going to be the WDF World Cup or the APA Cup, the Asia Pacific Cup, but we didn't have a chance this year, so everything is gone, so that was a shame, but we have a big handful of young players coming up now in Hong Kong, for sure.
I watched the end of the final yesterday and saw you and your opponent both wearing the face masks as well while playing. Was that an easy adjustment, or did that take a little bit of getting used to?
Oh yeah, it was. When I was told at first, right, two players telling me that, we have to, because that was the last thing I heard. Do you know that we have to wear masks to play in this tournament? I said, no, you're kidding, right? So because I was watching, in England. I mean, when the Players' Championship, nobody wear masks, right? Nobody does, right? I mean, so I kind of they say, yeah, but in Hong Kong, the government restriction is that you have to wear masks when with this one. So I really don't want to argue much about that. I said okay. So what I did is that I find a proper mask, because I try different masks and it feels different, because some masks are thicker and bigger so I find one that is kind of a thin in the material, and it actually cling onto my face. So So I don't really feel the when I do the take back of the darts, it bothers me. So it didn't bother me at all, and I practiced for about 3 days, and I keep doing it, and eventually I got used to it. But the problem is still the breathing, because it's so the breathing has to be totally different. But again, I tell myself, I said, hey, everyone is facing the same problem, so you have to overcome. I myself have to overcome the idea of whether it's difficult or not. I just mustn't let that bothers me. While I'm playing anyway. So it helps anyway. After 3 days of practicing, it gives me at least more confident that I can handle the mask, playing the mask on.
Good to hear. Well, let's look ahead then. And we spoke to you a few months back now for our Darts Legends series, and we spoke about your career in 1982, your first World Championship debut at Jolly's. You've now qualified for another one, and we've seen ever since then that the standard continued to rise. You've kept up with it. Do you still get the same buzz qualifying for a World Championship? I know you're going to be playing in the biggest tournament there is in Steel Tip.
Oh, yeah, I definitely do. Like I said, again, I know the standard of play has gone up. From the early days, even when the time with the Bristow and the John Lowe, all those, in the early days, the averages, you look at it now, it's gone up so much higher. But again, in every sport, I always, it's the same thing. Whether it's going to be a 100-meter dash, the time is going to get better, but somehow or other it's going to stop somewhere. But same as our averages in darts, I think, and once upon a time when you hit a 90 average, it's like, wow, it's great. You can really win championship with 90 averages in the early days, and then suddenly it become to a point of you have to be in the high 90s. And people are shooting in the hundreds right now, But obviously, I do know that we have to get more consistent and more, should I say, better in terms of averages in order to compete in a thought that we can actually win it. So I believe that it's tougher, but again, it's something that I think is the beauty of darts, is that it drives you to be better anyway, That's why when I practice now, I feel that I'm getting better, because I know my averages are better now, than what it is before. So it's a matter of just putting in during the match, how composed I am, and how much adrenaline that is pumping through me, and that I can control my nerve a little and let it flow, because I know I'm capable. Because just before talking to you, I was just practicing on the dartboard, and for the 5 legs I played. Just 5 legs. Imagine I have an opponent. I play 5 legs, and every leg was 15 darts and below. So, I know it's possible. So it's a matter of putting it on the stage at the right time and doing the right thing. Just like when we do the night dart, it's just a matter of timing. That's all. The right time, the right moment. If you do it, you'll do it.
You mentioned the 9-darter, of course, some great moments that you've had in World Championships. This is going to be your 25th World Championship appearance across both the codes. The 9-darter in the BDO in 1990. More recent times, of course, the 170 finish against Michael Van Gogh was got to be a highlight. But for you, what would you say have been your favourite moments playing in World Championships over the years so far?
Oh, definitely the 9-dart, I think. I think the 9-dart actually has changed my life a big deal. Not just darts alone, but my personal I wouldn't say stardom, but I think recognition in a way, because until this very day, no matter what it is, even though it's 30 years ago now, people still talk to me about 30 years ago when I did the 9-dart. What I'm saying? It is very strange, but that definitely was my greatest honor and my greatest memory. That's for sure, definitely.
And lastly, before we let you go, I know it's still only a day since you won the qualifier, but any plans really in place for coming over to the UK? What are going to be the main hurdles that you've got to overcome, like quarantine and things like that? How are you planning on getting over to the UK and being ready for the tournament?
You see, actually, in fact, I've written an email to Matt Porter, PDC, and I'm waiting for an answer. I talked to Dave Allen too, but the thing is that nobody has actually given me an answer in terms of the quarantine. But what I heard is that there's going to be a letter given to me by PDC on the invitation. And with obviously I have to go through my procedure like what I did for the World Cup in Austria. Is that in Hong Kong I have to go through a test and get get it passed, and then 48 hours or something like that before I travel into UK with that in hand. And with the letter from PDC, I do not have to quarantine. That's what I heard right now, but I have no confirmation from PDC yet. Because if I have to be quarantined for 10 days or 14 days, then my plan got to be really, for example, right now, the draw is going to be done on the 3rd of December, right? Now, so if I'm drawn to play on the first day of the match, and I'm going to be quarantined for 10 days, it's impossible for me to be there. Am I right or not? It's kind of a... So I really hope there is no quarantine involved when I get to UK. So then I can actually see what day I'm playing, and I plan to come probably about 4 or 5 days before my match and get settled in, and things like that. So, but if there's a quarantine, then my plan have to change. Whatever the outcome is. So I need to talk to PDC about that, and I'm still waiting anyway.
Well, Paul, it's always a pleasure to chat to you. Do appreciate your time. Congratulations again on winning the qualifier yesterday, and safe travels over here to the UK, and we wish you all the best for the World Championship.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, and you stay safe over there too. Okay, hopefully there's gonna be great news, and I do well, and then we can talk again. Okay.
Thanks again to Paul for joining us. Now, in a moment, you're going to hear from our good friend of the show, Matthew Kinnan, his COVID rant. I never thought we'd be playing one of them on the show, but he gives us his thoughts in a moment on the fans coming back at Ali Pali. So here's his thoughts on it, and then we'll be back with our thoughts on the fans coming back.
Well, hello, Alex, Burton and Hannah. Hope you're all well, and well done, as always, for all your work on the weekly Dartscast. Now, it's the season to be jolly, isn't it, normally this time of year? The Dartmas, courtesy of the PDC, is nearly upon us. And, of course, London is in Tier 2 restrictions, and you had a good chat with Barry Hearn in relation to fans basically being allowed in 1,000 fans to watch every session of the PDC Worlds. And as I record this, it looks like that is coming to fruition, and tickets are going to be released very shortly. Now, I appear to be the only person in the darts community, or seemingly, or certainly on social media, that appears to be questioning whether this is a good idea. Now, my views are skewed, and it's mainly down to the fact that my work is related to adult social care, so that's the most vulnerable people in society, and I've seen the effect that COVID has had, in home care, which is what I deal with, which is care in people's own homes. It's not care homes, but care homes are connected, of course, and we all know the problems that care homes have had in relation to COVID. And COVID, of course, is a very divisive subject. I fully appreciate that. Everyone's got an opinion on it. There are those that say that we should just open up and let it rip through society. I cannot subscribe to that view at all, based, on what I see every day in my line of work. Also, what I have also seen in relation to COVID, and appreciate this is darts related, I am coming back to that point, but at the start of November I tested positive for COVID. It was very bad flu, and for a couple of days, and then I recovered. It was just fatigue, and then no taste or smell now, but that's a minor inconvenience, if anything. My wife is still ill, and we think it's post-viral fatigue, so glands hurt, she's tired all the time, it's really, really tough, and she still hasn't been back to work, and that's 4 weeks after I tested positive. So basically, the point I'm trying to make is that COVID is still out there, it still has an effect, it affects people in different ways, and in the worst case scenario, and I hate to think morbidly about this, if the PDC do open it, and they're going to open this up as long as they can do, to get a crowd in to watch this World Championship, because it brings it in line with indoor theatre performances, which I also don't think should be happening at the moment. If they do open it up, they're opening themselves up for potentially this virus spreading, and it will reach the most vulnerable in society. It's only a matter of time. Now, that is, especially considering that 1 in 3 people don't have symptoms. So that's the worst case scenario. And it is whatever COVID secure infection control measures you put in place, it's a risk. And that's the only point that I'm making, in relation to this. And I'm sure they will put lots of COVID secure measures in place. I mean, it's going to be interesting anyway, because obviously they can't sell alcohol without a substantial meal. So there could be an instance where you say, yes, I'll have that plate of chips, please, and 25 Jaeger bombs. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think that it could mean that there'll be a more sensible crowd than what we're used to at Ali Pali, especially pre-Christmas, when you normally get the stag parties and the office parties in. Well, there are no office parties now because of everything that's happening. And I just think that, we've had lots of positive news recently, globally, in relation to vaccines, especially in the UK in relation to the Oxford vaccine. That's going to be rolled out very, very soon. Local authorities are gearing up as we speak to have big centres in their boroughs and towns and provinces, to use a better word for it, for mass rollout. This is happening. Vaccines are so close. Would it not be better, and perhaps this is more of a government issue rather than the PDC issue, but would it not be better just to wait for those vaccines and wait until we can be relatively safe and go back to some form of normality and we can all get on with life? I absolutely want to get back to normality as much as the next person. I'm not trying to poo-poo this, but it's a serious issue. And in the worst case scenario, this could be another Anfield or another Cheltenham, which happened, of course, in March, and a super spreader event. In the worst case scenario, it's a big risk. And if there is a positive case, and crowds suddenly can't come in for whatever reason, I wouldn't want to be in the PDC press office, because that will get a lot of attention if that happens. Hopefully I'm wrong.
So that was Matthew's thoughts on the fans coming back. Let's get our thoughts on it. Burton, are you for it? Are you against it?
I lean towards being against it. I think it's just a little too soon to do it safe. And it's not just, it's not just the fans in attendance that you have to think about, but it's also all the staff and all of the PDC representatives and the players who you have to think about. And hopefully they have the right precautions, and we can't have fans near the players on the walk-ons. But even still, there's still no way to guarantee the safety of all the PDC employees are going to be there, all the stewards and everyone, selling food and drink. You do want to give these people the chance to work, but at the same time, they're risking their health and their lives and their families' health and their lives. It's not just the fans who are choosing to make this risk, who are putting other people in danger. That said, at some point, we do need to move back towards normalcy, and it does add something. And I think most of the people in the PDC, including the players, would rather the fans be there, even if it means they themselves are taking a risk, than there not be fans there. So I don't think it's a decision you can criticize. And we had Barry Hearn on last week, and their PDC is going to abide by all the regulations and all the rules, and they're going to do the best to make it as safe for everyone as possible. But my preference would have been to do it behind closed doors and come back with one hell of a World Championships next year. But I can understand the other point of view.
It is a difficult one, and we call this the PDC World Championship. The Daily Mail, since the news came out that fans were coming back at Ali Pali in a couple of weeks' time, have called the tournament Britain's biggest Christmas booze up. Well, I think it's going to look a little bit different this year. We are going to get a limited crowd. We should mention venue holds around 3,000. There's going to be a 1,000 capacity for each session. If people listening are looking to book tickets, they went on sale a couple of days ago. I think when I last checked, there were some still available, but they've got to be booked in tables of 4. You can't book an individual seat or 2 seats or 3 seats. You've got to go with 4. You've got to go with people from your own household or people from your own support bubble, and that kind of put an end to my hopes of keeping up my run of going. I've been going for the last 7 years, been very fortunate to go each time, and starting off that run with the 2-9 Darters session with Carl Anderson and Terry Jenkins. But that run for me, unfortunately, comes to an end, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of our listeners listening that fall into that bracket where they're not able to fill up the 4 people from their household or support bubble, or if they're in tier 3 in the UK, because these tickets only available to people in tiers 1 and 2, and I believe as well only to people in the UK. So I know a lot of darts fans that come to this tournament from around the world, people from Germany, people from the Netherlands, all over that come to this event. We're seeing a lot more people, a lot more darts fans from all over come to this tournament. So it is going to feel very different. I don't think it's going to be kind of that party atmosphere that we're used to seeing. There is going to be the limits on things. And yeah, I think you look at the article that the PDC put out on their website, took a good 5 minutes to go through all the things, all the regulations that they've put out. And we've seen as well that the PDC have done a fantastic job putting darts back on TV without a crowd. And we spoke about it. The Grand Slam was an unbelievable tournament, and off there as well, Barry Hearn agreed with us. He said that was the best tournament he's seen for a long time, and they could have easily put the World Championship on at Ali Pali behind closed doors without a crowd, and I think we'd have seen a brilliant World Championship. We'd have probably seen a lot more tie breaks than we're going to see this year. But I think at the same time, they wanted to get the fans back, not just for us as the viewers, but also for the players as well. I think they've gone through the last 6-7 months without the crowds, getting some, well, in the UK anyway, but getting some fans back, getting back to a little bit of normalcy. I think they'll really appreciate that, and hopefully it'll add to the spectacle, and we're going to see some great games. And now we'll move on to our final guest on this week's show, and it is a man who's got plenty of support. It is the host of Edgar TV, Matthew Edgar.
I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the host of Edgar TV, Matthew Edgar. Thanks again for joining us, Matthew. How are you doing?
Couldn't be better. Absolutely brilliant, yeah.
Good to hear. Well, we'll come on to talk about the World Championship draw a little bit later, but let's look back to the start of this week, the PDPA Qualifier for the World Championship on Monday. Heading into it, we found out over the weekend the split between the UK and the rest of the world. There was going to be 6 spots in total as well. How are you feeling going into that on Monday?
Confident, to say the least. I knew I was going in as a seed. I didn't know who the seed was going to be on the other end of the draw. I found out the night before it was going to be Josh Payne, and I think I went there just with the attitude that I'm going to be playing Josh Payne today to get through. And yeah, and the confidence that I went in there with was instantly brought out on the practice board. I had a practice with Aaron Beanie beforehand, and I was just finishing everything. I was playing these finishing games, and I was just finishing everything. And it got to the point where I could almost have thrown him underarm. And I said to Aaron, I says, I'm getting to this psychological state that's above confidence. So we've got confidence, but then we go into an element I like to call knowing, where we know something's going to happen. And I said to Aaron, I said, I'm in this knowing state, and I don't think I missed a shot at finishes, especially like those low combination ones, the 68, 72s, 82s. I was taking those out for fun, and you know, in that environment, the standard of player that we was dealing with, they are the game winners. When you're looking at a professional standard, they're the things that win the matches, and I was taking them all day from start to finish.
And some fond memories, I'm sure, of last year coming through that qualifier, and you get past Gary Blades and Martin Atkins to reach that last round against Josh Payne. You run off 6 legs from 1-0 down to go 6-1 up, 1 leg away. How do you try and keep yourself focused, being so close to getting over the line?
There's 2 things that went on. One was 2014. 2014 for me was a year I could have walked away from darts. I lost in the final of the Grand Slam qualifier, and then 2 weeks later I lost in the final of the World Championship qualifier. Going into that game with Josh Payne, I did have flashbacks thinking, not again, because 2014, I've matched that this year. I lost to Simon Whitlock in the final of the Grand Slam qualifier, and it was almost like a focus thing from the start. Like you say, I was 6-1 up, and at that point I didn't even think it was 1 then. I knew I had to win another leg, because it's not like other sports. You know, football, we're ahead, right, we'll just go stand in the corner. You don't get that luxury with darts. You've got to keep attacking and keep pushing forward, and I never thought it was 1 until the winning dart went in, and then it all hit me all at once what had just happened, because I played really well that day. You know, I didn't feel nervous. I felt confident. You said about like the year before qualifying through the qualifier, but I'd say the year before I was nervous, I was edgy, and I certainly didn't play as well last year as I did this year. And this year I went there almost knowing I was going to win it. The year before I went there hoping I was going to win it. So there was certainly a strong element of confidence on that day, and I think that comes across, like saying, those key moments. I was put under pressure at many times. Martin Atkins at a key moment hit a 180 to leave double 10, and I took out a 70 finish, which might not sound that big of a deal, but it's one dart in hand or you're losing that leg. The same game I took out a 127 finish, and I just kept doing those shots all day because I was very, very confident, and I'm confident going forward. I'm literally took a bit of time from the practice to do this right now, and I'm pounding this practice board, and I'm going to be dangerous, I think.
Yeah, some good performances on Monday, and you were one of several players, it's got to be said, going into that qualifier with your tour card essentially on the line. What were the emotions like when that winning double does go in, and not only you've qualified for Ali Pali, but also your tour card now looking safe?
Yeah, that's a bonus of it, really, you know. And the thing is, like, last year I don't think it looked as safe as it does this year. So, you know, you play other events with baggage. You play either a Pro Tour or a series or an event with baggage. I'm going to the World Championship to play the World Championship. It's not, I need to do this to keep this, or I need to do this to get this ranking. I'm playing that tournament as a standalone event, and it's one of the first times I've been able to realistically do that, and I think that's probably a big difference, and allows me to go into it as well with this element of confidence. And like I said before on other things, like I'm going in as a player, where previously I've been a darts fan since 1995. You know, we used to always go to the World Match Play, get family passes, and it used to be our family holiday, and we did that for years. And I've always done that, and I've been always watching it on the TV ever since I can remember. And the first two times I've gone down there, I've probably gone down there like a fan. This time I'm going as a player to try and essentially win the World Championship.
Well, let's touch on your previous World Championships, because when we last had you on the show in October last year, you spoke to my co-host Burton about the first World Championship you played in your debut. You said you hated it, you were ill in the build-up, you felt like a guest at the event. What was it like going back last year, playing Darius Labanauskas again, unfortunately going out in the first round, but how did you reflect the second time round?
I feel like I got a good towel in that one. I felt like I pushed. So first set, I played really well in the first set. He played amazing, took the first set with throw. A more experienced version of me, or me talking to, if I could speak to that guy that was stood on the stage now, I'd say just play the same level and you're still in the game. You've got the throw next set, that will be the difference between the two. Instead, that version of me panicked and went, right, we've got to step it up even higher now to compete, and it went backwards from there. So I always say that you don't lose, you learn, and I learned quite a lot from that experience, and I certainly won't be making those mistakes again. And it felt like nothing was good enough. And, you know, when you want to win something so bad, if you get back-to-back tons, sometimes you can be like, oh, I want more, because you want the win straight away. You want it now. You don't want it in 20 minutes. You want it now. You don't want to have to go through the heartache because you want it to happen for you. And I'm now in a position where I'm ready to go through that emotion and go through that heartache and enjoy that, because everyone does this in everything. You know, we're all going to run the London Marathon. We're all going to run 26 miles. But after 3 miles, we change our minds. Oh, I've done enough today. That'll do. Because the psychology's gone from a calm mindset to a mindset that's under pressure. The heart rate's up. We're sweating. We don't enjoy that anymore. And I'm going to enjoy that, and I'm ready for the fight this time rather than shying away from it.
Well, looking back on 2020 so far, we've got to mention the UK Open back in March, just before the virus outbreak and everything that's happened, and matching your best run in a major, reaching the last 32. Did the lockdown perhaps come at a wrong time for you, or how did you use that time away from the tour?
That came at the right time for me. So the UK Open was a nice run, that was definitely. But if you look at the Pro Tour at the time, I wasn't performing. Now, I do suffer with a long-standing wrist injury. And I think with that sort of the lockdown coming, it came at the right time because it allowed me to rest and get ready and prepare and make changes. I dropped a couple of grams off my darts. That's helped with the situation, so I'm not throwing as heavy a dart anymore. I made a couple of little tweaks with the throw, and I was able. We don't get the chance when the tour's in full swing to take, or I'm not brave enough to take the risks to make these sort of changes mid-season. But because we didn't know when the next one was, it's like, right, I'm going to get my head down, I'm going to work away from the board here. And then we went to the summer series, and I was very happy with the performances there. I was happy with the performances in the autumn series. You know, I beat Mensa Suljevic and Gary Anderson in the summer. I probably should have beat Peter Wright missing match darts in the autumn. And the level of performance was strong. So I do think, like, I'm making steps forward. I'm developing the performance. I'd safely say my averages are going up. So, I think that came at a good time for me, and I think it's actually helping rather than being a hindrance.
You mentioned the win against Gary Anderson during the summer series. I don't think you've brought it up too many times, the way that you won that game with the 170 finish. Is that the best finish of your career, or are there others which better it?
Well, I don't like to talk about it too much. I like to keep it quite quiet. But as you brought it up, we'll go there. So, that was a big moment for me, because it goes back to what I said earlier, when I said, like, we don't lose, we learn. Earlier in that week, the story that I don't tell too often is I had 3 match darts to beat Gary Anderson about 2 or 3 days previous, and I missed those 3 darts, and before I threw those 3 darts, I went, this is to beat Gary Anderson. And Gary Anderson for me is one of the best 5 players that's ever lived, so it was a massive scalp and a massive moment. And I've gone to the board to throw and to try and get this double 16, but I was wanting to hit the double 16 for the win, not because I was throwing that shot in that moment. And I was able to change that psychology for the second time I played him, and then to do it in the style that I did with the 170 finish, it was a complete validation of all the changes that I've been doing in terms of the mental side of the game and the preparation side. So I was very, very happy with that.
Well, let's look ahead then. The draw for the World Championship this morning, you ran a watch-along on Edgar TV, your YouTube channel. I popped in just before the draw, around 500 to 600 watching it. What's it like finding out who you're going to play and having that many people seeing your reaction to the draw live?
The amount of people that came in for the reaction for the draw, that was amazing. The support that I've been getting through Edgar TV it's such a boost. And some people, some people look at it and they go, is that a good idea to be doing that? But for me, it is. I'm not saying it's right, I'm saying it's right for me. And I draw so much off of that. There's the support, the messages, the constant support that I get from YouTube and, from the people that follow that page. It's such a lift to me. And it's something that I've not really had this sort of backing before, and there's such a strong element of confidence that comes from that. And like I say, 600 people wanted to come and to enjoy that with me, and I want to share this journey with them. If I was on the other side of this fence, that I wasn't a player, I would love to be sat watching another player doing this and sharing this journey. So it's great that I can do that, and that people are sort of coming along on it with me, and it's such a boost.
Definitely. Well, it's going to be your 3rd consecutive appearance at Alexandra Palace in a few weeks' time. For the first time, it's not going to be against Darius in the first round. You've got Mike Kivenhoven first up, and for the right to play Metsur Suljovic in the second round. I know it's not been long since the draw, but how do you feel about your draw there? I'm
quite happy with that, to be honest. One of the main things I'm really happy with is the pace of the game. Now, Mike Kivenhoven's going to be a nice pace. He's not a slow player. He's going to just get up there and get on with it, which is going to be nice, because that's going to suit me down to the ground. I can get up there, I can get into a rhythm, and it's going to allow me to be me and get into my rhythm and into my flow and find my range on the board. And, I look at it not so much of how I feel about it, but I try to put myself in his shoes. And he was probably sat watching that draw as well, and he would have been looking at the other pool of players. And I can guarantee I was one of the players he wouldn't have wanted to come out on that pool of players. So I look at it more on that side, and I think he's probably going to be more bothered about this than I am.
And for us as fans of darts, and you mentioned yourself, you've been a fan before you got into playing. It's a special time of year, getting excited for the start of the World Championship. What is it like as a player this time now? You've qualified, the draw's been made, order of play is going to come out soon. What's it like the lead up now in the next 2 weeks or so?
It feels different to, if you'd asked me this question last year, I'd have gone, oh, it's so good, it's so exciting, and it's all these, which it still is. It's still exciting. It's the World Championship. It's the biggest event in the world, and for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, the biggest moment, the biggest thing in the world of darts will be my first round game, and for those 40 minutes that we're on stage. And if I look at it now, though, I look at it and I say, it's a bit more, it's hard to describe the difference. Like I say, it's coming down as a player, and before it was like, I'd watch Sky Sports just so I could see the adverts and go, oh, I'm going to be there. This is so exciting. When now I'm sort of detaching myself from the show side of it a little bit, and it's more about the playing side of it, where before it used to be like really exciting, like, oh, it's going to be so good, oh, it's going to be at the Alexandra Palace and all these moments that have happened there. I want to make my own moments, and that's the difference this year. I want to make my own moments.
You mentioned in one of your videos earlier this week hoping to get some practice sessions in with the former major winner Kevin Painter, and before the second lockdown he was saying about you forgetting something whenever you turned up to practice with him. How did that friendship and partnership start?
It's when he moved to Daventry. So he moved to Daventry about 11 years ago or so now. I was out practicing and he just happened to be there. And I ended up having to practice with him. And then he was like, do you want to come down and have another practice sort of thing? And at the time I was sort of just playing local stuff. I didn't really have the funds to do anything other than that anyway, because I had a young family at the time, and I didn't have the funds to do anything. So I was like, this is brilliant. I get to practice with Kev. And then I found myself like challenging him. And at the time, he was in the top 16 in the world still. And I thought, if I can challenge him, and he's in the top 16, surely I could have a crack at this. So flipped a few things together, allowed myself to get to Q School and do a couple of events, and that sort of got everything going and the ball rolling on that side. And then ever since, we've practiced constantly, weekly. We meet up, we're in constant communication in that side of things. And, I've practiced with many other players, many people before, but for me, Kevin's the go-to guy for practice, and he's the best practice partner I've ever had.
Excellent. Well, we should finish up with a mention back to your YouTube channel, Edgar TV. You've now passed 13,000 subscribers. The Edgar Nation just keeps on growing. If you had to pick out your favourite moments since you started the channel, what would they be?
Favourite moments. There's been so many. I did a video recently about my favourite videos, and I was going to do 5, it was 7, then it was 10. There's just so many. I think my favourite thing I like about it is instant feedback and the support that I get from it, and vice versa. I hope that it helps people, either because I put some tips and advice and things on there. I hope it helps some people with their own darts and with their own game, or whether it helps people like with the lockdown, giving them things to do or giving them something to watch. So hopefully I'm providing something for the people as well, because they're providing me with such a boost on the psychological side of things and the support. So yeah, that would be my best thing, the support.
Yeah, I know a lot of our listeners enjoy watching your videos, so keep up the great work with them, and congratulations again on coming through the qualifier on Monday, and we wish you all the best for the World Championship when it comes around.
Brilliant, cheers, thank you.
Thanks again to Matthew for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with a couple of listener questions. The first one comes from Matt Langan, who says, Smith, Campbell, Baggish, Lauby, who will the media be talking about most after round 1 in the World Championship, and who's going deepest?
And a question, of course, coming from a fellow Texan of mine. He's in Austin. He's 3 hours over from me, which just, a very short drive for us here in Texas. But yeah, so question about all the North American players. And I think the easy answer is Jeff Smith. He is the one player who is qualified by right from North America. He's made a Pro Tour final this year in his first year back as a tour card holder after a long time out. Former world finalist over in the BDO. But he does have not necessarily the easiest of draws. Not that there's, anymore any such thing as an easy draw, but he goes against Keen Barry, who's a very good young player. And if the winner of that gets Chris Dobie, who hasn't had the best year, but obviously always ups his game for Worlds. But I think he's the easy answer of who's going to go the furthest, who they'll be talking the most about. But if one of the other North American players can win, they will be talking about him. And what about Danny Lobby? Ryan Searle's a great player, but he's very inconsistent. Lobby's a young kid. If he brings his A game and Searle doesn't show up, Lobby could be getting through that match. And wouldn't be the first time that Jeffrey Deswan is playing in the second round as a seed against an American after, last year when he went against the guy who knocked out Raymond van Barneveld. Could be talking about him, but I think Jeff Smith's the easy answer and most likely answer.
It is a difficult one for me because I think the draw has not been kind at all to the 4 players from North America that are competing in this World Championship. Jeff Smith against Keen Barry. Yeah, Jeff's qualified through the Pro Tour and done very well this year on his first year back on the Pro Tour. But to get Keen Barry, I think if you'd have said before the draw pick 5 players from the international qualifiers that you would prefer not to play, I think Keane Barry would have been in there because he is a star for the future, maybe even a star for the present. We'll see how this World Championship goes, but I think that is a tough draw for him. I'm going to go with his World Cup partner. I'm going to go with Matt Campbell because I think he's going to come through that first round game against Scott Waits. Again, another tough draw. Then he's got to play Nathan Aspinall if he gets through that. One of the players that only gets to World Championship semi-finals. He doesn't get to any other round. That's the round that he'll go out in. So I think Matt Campbell will get the win. The American too, Danny Baggish, I've got a feel for him a little bit because last year he played very well. Again, against Nathan Aspinall, he won the first set, ended up losing 3-1, but the last couple of sets go into a deciding leg. So he pushed one of the top players very close, and he's got Damon Heta this time around, which is a very tough draw from that list of Pro Tour qualifiers. I think a lot of people are expecting Damon to do well and come back next year as one of the seeded players. And then Daniel Albee, one of 13 players as a debutant from those list of international qualifiers. Saw glimpses of him at the World Cup with Chuck Pulio and against Ryan Searle. I think Ryan's coming back into some form. He's played well at the Grand Slam, unlucky not to get through the group stage. And if he does turn up, I think that could be a comfortable afternoon or evening. I can't remember what session it is. But yeah, I think out of the 4, I'm going to go with Matt Campbell on this one.
Now, we'll be back this upcoming week to talk more about the World Championships. So if you think we're not talking about the Worlds because we don't care about it, that's not the case. But we do have one more listener question. Looking back in the opposite direction, a question, something that we don't think we ever suggested. And we've talked about a lot of changes to the Grand Slam and potential ones. But here comes from John Bobble. Why don't they have draws in the Grand Slam groups? I think it would be better and won't be an advantage to the person throwing first. Do you agree?
I think it's a very good question, and shout out to John as well. He's going to be a first-time listener of the show. He's said he's going to have a listen tomorrow, so we are answering his question for him. I think it's certainly an idea to think about. And okay, with the Grand Slam, I think they've changed the format in recent years where now the 2 winners from the opening games will play against each other in the second round games, and the 2 losers will go up against each other. So going into that third round of group games, we do have the chance of matches there being something to play for, whereas before I think the draw for all the group games was done before the tournament, so we knew who was going to play each other in the first, second and third group games. So we do kind of get a bit closer groups this time round, and we saw it in the Grand Slam just gone. The one night we had the 4 penalty shootouts, 2 players going up against each other to get through, the winners go through, and then the other night we had the goal differential night where we saw 2 players with 1 win from their 3 games go through. But putting a draw into the equation, yeah, why not? I don't see why they couldn't do that. It's an extra leg on each game, or if they decide to make it the best of 8 instead of the best of 10, I've got no problem with that either. But putting the draws into it, it will add another dimension. Not quite sure how high up on the list of priorities it is at the moment, but I think going forward to mix the Grand Slam up a little bit, put the draws in, yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about before, but I'm almost positive when we've talked about changes, I've never suggested, I don't think you have, and it's not something I've thought much about. But I think I like the idea. It definitely adds an additional dimension, and it can create a lot of oddities on the final day if players have draws. But maybe you do have to go more like football in that case and have it 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. It is now, make it best out of 10 legs, but that draw is there, and it could make a difference. But we don't want a player to get through on 3 draws ahead of a player who has a win, or at least a win and a draw. So I think you need to go more on the football points setup as opposed to the Premier League one where it's 2 for a win, 1 for a draw. But I like the idea. It's something different, and it can add some dynamics. And like John suggested, it would take away some of that advantage of throwing first, which in a very short format makes sense. You don't want too much to ride on the bullseye. Anything else for this week?
I want to say thanks to our guests for joining us on the show this week, and thanks to everyone who sent in questions. I've kept a list of people that sent in questions. We're going to go through a few more of them next week on our World Championship preview show, so thanks for sending them in. No darts this weekend, but there is going to be some darts from us, the Bang Average League Super Sunday, courtesy of Matt Langan. He's setting that up for us, so we're going to see the playoffs and the League Cup in that, so good luck to everyone involved in that. As we say, we're going to be back next week with our World Championship preview show. Date to be confirmed, we're not quite sure, but we've got some good guests lined up for that next week, so look forward to that. And I should give a mention as well to our sponsors of the show. We didn't have any games to pick for this week. I didn't want to be unfair on our bang average league players and pick the games from that. And you, Burton, because you probably not followed it as closely as I have, but just want to say thanks to Low Six for their continued support and looking forward to putting on some good contests during the World Championship.
Haven't followed it as closely this season, but maybe I'll rejoin one of these years and pay attention. But no, I think it was smart not having us tip those, because even though I might have not paid as much attention as you have, it would be even more embarrassing when I still managed to beat you in that competition.
Yeah,
but
very true.
2020 is almost over, but it is the best time of the year. It is finally Dartsmas. As we've said, we'll be back next week to preview the World Championship with episode number 180, a guest appearance to introduce that episode, and I'm sure plenty of guests who will be competing or otherwise participating in the World Championships. Anything you want us to answer, send in your questions. Anyone you think we should get on that we might not have considered, let us know. 180 is a big episode, not just because it's our Dartsmas preview. You know how to reach us. You know how to download and listen to us, and we appreciate that you do it. We'll give you our World Championship predictions, but you just have to hang tight for just a few more days until those come around.